Joining me now are Mike Spicer, he's the COO of Forgotten Harvest, Pastor Semmeal Thomas of City Covenant Church, and Pam Weaver with Development Centers. Welcome to all of you. So, Pastor Thomas, I want to start with you because you're here in this neighborhood. The families who attend this church are part of your congregation, and you see all of this up close. You see and hear what the needs look like. This church is really on the front lines of trying to meet those needs. But give us a flavor of what you hear and see from the folks that you welcome here each Sunday.
Well, first of all, I always like to tell people that Brightmoor is a wonderful community. And I use the term grit. They are survivors, strong, witty, able to deal with more than what most can. But there's a tremendous amount of trauma in this community. I noticed it first really as it, in regards to self-medicating. You know, as I preached each Sunday and as I talked and tried to inspire people, I was constantly trying to get them to stop smoking weed or stop drinking or stop this or stop that. And I started to realize that it's more than just an addiction, that people were trying to escape, if you will. And so then we started looking a little bit deeper, what are they escaping from? And just having a conversation internally and with others in our community about what is it like to walk by blighted homes every single day. Every single day hearing gunshots, having family members and community members killed on a regular basis. One year we buried 5 young men in the summer. 5 young men who were all murdered. And it was just, you know, I was watching the news that same year and Dearborn had 1 murder. And I'm sitting here thinking, here we are, a small community, 14,000 people or less, and we buried 5 young men under age of 30. And so it has been a tremendous endeavor, and it's frightening when you really start becoming alert and sensitive to what's going on around.
Yeah. You have recently been really involved in the idea of trying to give people better places to live here in this community. Talk about the developments that you guys have undertaken here.
So one of the things, another thing that we came across, really a dynamic was hopelessness, that people constantly found barriers. And so we tried to surround all of our services that we offer through here through eliminating barriers. So our last endeavor has been a for-profit business that we started called More Bright Properties. More Bright Properties is an idea that came from our denomination, Evangelical Covenant, and it came from a passage in the Bible and a gentleman by the name of Bezalel. Bezalel went back to rebuild the city. And so what we've been trying to do is offer affordable housing in a 4-mile radius of our church. So we've been purchasing properties, we've been rehabbing properties and renting them out, hopefully getting people ready to purchase property, because that's the first a leg to financial security, or to financial security, actually owning property themselves. So we've got a couple of beautiful homes in this neighborhood. It is a very difficult endeavor because Detroit is starting to become sexy and property value is going up, and it's not as cheap as it used to be. But
get priced out.
Nevertheless, right, we've been able to purchase, rehab for around $25,000, $30,000.
You know, what's important about that, I think, is just the turn there away from demolition, which is one of the things that we have talked about for years in places like Brightmoor, abandonment and demolition. You are saying, let's build, let's create spaces that people want to be in.
Absolutely. Let me say this, the government can't fix this, and business is not going to be able to fix this at all. It's going to have to be a collaborative effort. Churches and parachurch organizations, business owners, and government all coming together to reverse some of the negative impacts that have been over our city for decades. Yeah. Not just for a few years, but for decades. If the Lord blesses me, I'll be 59 in a couple of months. And I remember Hudson's downtown. I remember Grand River flourishing, shop after shop after shop. there's a generation that doesn't have any concept of that. And I'm very excited about what I see in Brightmoor, in Rosedale, Grandmont. I'm watching this community come back. And I'm praying more and more that our folks, the people within our community, will recognize the value of what we have in Detroit.
Mike, food insecurity is, I always say, one of the, it's kind of an obvious issue in Detroit in some ways, but it's also sort of a sneaky issue in Detroit in the sense that it exists in places that we wouldn't necessarily expect it to exist, and it exists in ways that we don't always understand. We think about food insecurity, we think about people just going hungry all the time, but it takes on a lot of different faces.
Yeah, I think the big misnomer around food insecurity and hunger is it's the homeless, right? And so we see that a lot, and we hear that a lot as we talk to the community, and that is just simply not true. Most of the clients that we serve are the working poor. They're people who have multiple jobs. They're people who just need that helping hand. The vulnerable population in our community, seniors and children. 1 in 2 children in the city of Detroit are considered food insecure. That's 70, almost 80,000 kids in the city of Detroit. In Brightmoor, we have 6 partners that we work with within Brightmoor, and we bring and distribute to those partners almost 2 million pounds of food a year to help those kids that are in need, because when they're not as good in school. Absenteeism is up. So it does have a negative impact on how they're going to get out of food insecurity as well.
Yeah. The other thing about food insecurity is that I've always thought is tricky is you can feed people and they're not hungry today or tomorrow, but moving them to a space where food insecurity goes away is a much tougher proposition.
Yeah, and so we've recently undertaken a new technology that helps us determine, or not determine, but help gather information, help gather data that we can look at to know how many people we're going to be serving at our pantry. But not only that, it can also help us to gather data and know what's going on in the community, the demographics, how many kids, how many seniors. And what we can do with that information is we're food rescue, right? That is our core competency as an organization. But what we can do with that data is then we can pass it along to Thaw or United Way or others that other people who are more skilled in the social services sector, that they can then take that aggregate data and understand what's going on in the community of Brightmoor and help bring services that can help support the community.
Yeah. Tell us what Development Centers sees from families, not just here in Brightmoor, but around the city.
Well, Development Centers has been here in Northwest Detroit, serving Detroit and parts of Wayne County to really address for families, for children and adults, their behavioral health, their emotional health, their social well-being. And so as the conversation has moved to trauma discussions in terms of what really is underlying so much of what presents, for referral. So maybe from a school, but they're referring because of one of those issues. They're referring because challenging behaviors. They have stayed fairly consistent through all of the kind of addressing the whole person's needs. So food insecurity, doing things to try and stabilize housing and all of that. The piece that consistently keeps coming up, especially for families and kids, is the fact that the challenging behaviors are still causing disruption in the home and distress in the family and the deterioration, really, of communities because of that.
Yeah. It's clear that we have to support families and kind of sometimes rebuild families in neighborhoods like this. Talk about how we do that, though.
So yes, I think it's, it occurs on multi-levels. So an agency like development centers can't do that by itself. We have been very fortunate to partner here in Brightmoor for a number of years with different strategies and initiatives that have taken place because there's such a focus on children in this neighborhood, and really opportunities to try to bolster and support families. What we know has, kind of helped in this is creating that network of making referrals easy, connecting families, having school-based therapy. So we have had our therapeutic services based in the school setting so that that's easily available to students who are in crisis. We've had, between the services, like the service array that we offer at development centers tries to, really focus on the convenience factor of getting therapists into home visits so that the parents don't, if transportation is a barrier, they can still get the services they need. They can come for outpatient services. We have psychiatric support and all of that, so they can get to the agency and get that kind of support that they need, as well as groups for the youth, so teens, early childhood, and most importantly, probably our newest development has been our Head Start programming, which really addresses whole child, whole family supports. And now having that in place, it's much easier to access for families the supports that they need.
One thing I want to note before we end is that each of them talked about the need for us to work across sectors and across organizations to deal with this, that there's no single institution that can deal with all of this alone. So thank you all for being here. And Pastor Thomas, thanks for having us here in your church.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.